Hello, Avaloy, Brady, Julie, Boya, Robert, Shia, Tim.
And Nick, let me share this with you. And I posted something similar, but it's necessary. We have so many meetings and so many presentations that are back to back that there's probably people that are in a meeting right now that are trying to get out of their meeting. So it's almost impossible to start on time with anything. It's almost like you have to say 2, but you really mean 2:05, you know?
Yep.
Looks like a topic there.
Yeah.
What is a topic?
And
No, I
would
love
call
it.
it-
I love
and
the
I would-
people who are like, we're only going to go till 5 till so you can take a stretch before your next meeting.
What I'd like to have as a topic that we could talk about is, I'll call it, can't we just make this an email?
Right. That's a good one.
Yeah.
And here's the thing is, like, my leadership will tell me, well, push back and just say that you can't make it. So I do, and then the organizer will say, okay, we'll reschedule this at a time that can work for you. And I'm like, okay, I tried.
You know,
it's amazing.
we had a faculty search in the BU, and we did so much stuff by email that by the time we got together was so efficient. Was that mantra you're saying, like, let's do it, yeah.
The second thing I really like is when you want to be efficient, you do standing meetings. My husband's company does this. And so you're literally standing there and they're like, well, we don't want to stand too long. Oh yeah, it's great.
Ah, okay. Hey, Matt, can you hear us now?
I think he's talking about Romina only. Romina, can you speak a little bit?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh yeah. I just saw Romina's voice, her mouth moving, but no sound.
Correct. We cannot hear you, Romina.
Because she was muted. Oh no, she's unmuted. Yeah, Romina, we cannot hear you. Oh boy, we complained to Romina that the sound was low.
I know it's
And
gone.
now
Yeah, now
the
it's
sound
really
is
low.
really low.
Yeah, it's on me.
I know.
She's
it's
going to
on you.
rejoin the meeting.
Yeah, she'll be back.
Okay.
Oh, she quit in anger.
To Shay's point, she just posted something in the chat, but that's the thing too. How many of you do this, right? You're in a meeting that you've prepped for, and then they don't ask you for any input, right? Or it's clear that you don't belong in this meeting. So instead, you start sending Slack messages or text messages to your colleagues like, what are we doing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're
Sounds
just
so familiar.
we're just chatting right now. We haven't
You
started.
know what I could do is to start talking the first slides. That takes a while, so I won't take too much time for the webinar if you guys want.
Also, we
Sure.
have started the webinar.
We are, yes,
Oh.
because we invited people. So
Okay.
Sanlin, you give me the green light.
No, it would be great. So let's go ahead and start, Maram, if you want to just do our introduction and then we'll get
Okay.
going. with our panelists.
I
Let me
love
do the
Matthew's
introduction.
the pregame show. Yes.
Okay, folks, welcome to the next installment of the SHIELD webinar. I am the director of SHIELD, and John Richardson is a program manager out of MIT. We're very excited to have you guys. Today, we are going to have these 3 wonderful panelists, and I will let my co-host, Sanlin Buxner, the director of outreach, introduce them after I'm done here. And we are talking about raising awareness of mental health in heliophysics community. Okay, just to start, to remind all of you guys that this is part of SHIELD, and SHIELD mission is to study the heliosphere. The heliosphere is an example of an astrosphere, and I like to always start, even for people that haven't thought about any heliosphere, to remind ourselves that when we look up to the sky and you see stars, they are not structures that are in isolation. They're surrounded by a cocoon. So each star, even though we cannot see them, each star is surrounded by a cocoon that we call an astrosphere. And in our case, the heliosphere we created a movie for SHIELD, the center, showing Earth and all the planets that reside within the heliosphere that is shown here in this cocoon form. And it's a much larger, engulf all our planets, and it's protecting us from energetic particles that comes from the galaxy. And it's probably related to how life evolved on planet Earth. And SHIELD, SHIELD stand for solar wind and hydrogen ion charge exchange and large scale dynamics. And the vision of SHIELD, that we will be able to create a digital twin of the heliosphere. And by then we mean we will be able to create a model that include lots of data and lots of different effects that drive the heliosphere, and be able to predict how the heliosphere will be in the future and how the heliosphere was in the past. And this is a picture of our first annual meeting. We already had a second one. And this is just to show the large group that we are. We are a group of many institutions, not only across US, but across the globe. We have international participation. And if you're interested, just go to this website to learn more about us. We have several science questions that we are trying to deal with, and I'm not going to spend time from this webinar going through them. This is just a mosaic to show the complexity of data, both in situ, both remote, both global processes, both small scale processes that are involved in us understanding this big structure. Another piece, a very, very critical piece, where this SHIELD webinar is part of it, we want to create a diverse space physics. And we are showing here, this is your spiral arm that engulf many, many activities that we are trying to do that, from RU students to the SHIELD webinars, to testimonials, to activity with grad students, activity with early careers. And so go to our website, check our different activities. One of them that's very close to my heart, and I like to advertise at the beginning of every webinar, because we would like to restart it this year, is to try to create a set of deployments from different peoples, not even folks that are involved in SHIELD, in a way that it's under this umbrella, you can't be what you can't see. We want to have, you as a different person that you are, be able to recognize yourself. I am like that first generation student. I am that like gender fluid person. I have the same story or similar. So those are like snippets, 1 to 2 minutes that they recorded. Go to our website, check it out. If you want to record your own story, just email us, SHIELD Outreach, or to the director, Sandy Buxner, or the deputy director, Nick Ross, that is also online. And we will be very happy to help you be part of it. We have a next event. We will have another webinar in May 17. So watch for that. And we will have a coffee chat. We have this activity where graduate students, early careers, participate without directors, without PI. This is a safe environment that Nick Ross run for discussing, challenges that you have in your career. So this is my last slide. We have a newsletter. Again, you can sign up. Just go to our website. This is a QR code. And we also have a very strong presence in social media. So with that, I will stop sharing and let our esteemed director be the host of this webinar with me.
Wonderful. Romina, I just want to make sure we can hear you before we start.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Wonderful.
And we can
Okay.
see.
We have 3 wonderful panelists with us today, and what we're going to be doing is Marav and I will be asking questions. We encourage you to continue to put in comments in the chat, questions in the chat, and we will bubble those up. with the time we have, and just to remind ourselves that this is recorded so you can always revisit it. So we're just going to start by having each of our panelists introduce themselves. And so what we're going to ask you to do is talk about the work you do professionally, as well as the work you do that may or may not be part of your day job, with how you are interested in our topic of kind of mental resilience. And so thinking about that. And so, Romina, I'm going to ask you to go first to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Shield Broadening Impact team to invite me to serve on this panel. My name is Romina Nikoukar. I am a senior scientist at Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory, where I have been working for more than 9 years now. My career in space physics has not been a typical one. I started this journey as a graduate student back in 2001, focusing on radio remote sensing of the near-Earth environment, space environment. I did 2 postdocs after that, and then I came to APL. I worked on many different projects, but in the past, after a few years at APL, I got the opportunity to expand the horizon of my research to the outer heliosphere and to work with the SHIELD team to study energetic particles and cosmic rays in the heliosheet and very local interstellar medium. To answer the question of what other things I do in non-professionally, not in my daytime job, and the reason that we started to work on this article on mental health, I have to say that at different stages of my career over the years, I have seen myself and many others struggling at times with mental health challenges, with stress, anxiety, panic attacks, relentless pressure, and regrettably sometimes by virtue of being a woman and an immigrant, I face additional mental health challenges, which is very unfortunate. Mental health is a very emotional topic for me, and oftentimes, until very recently, actually, I have never felt comfortable to talk about it, to share my challenges, to the point that, so I hide it, of course, and but to the point that sometimes it damages my physical health, which is totally unhealthy. So when the call for the white papers for the heliophysics, the Kilo survey came out, it prompted me and a few of my colleagues, including Kostas here, to think more deeply about mental health and the issues that we are facing and what we can do in order to maybe improve the situation a little bit. So the focus of this paper was not at all to provide a comprehensive review of all the mental health challenges that we face, rather was to serve an initial step to raise awareness on mental health and mental well-being and the strategies that we can make to improve the situation. And I'm very pleased to see that this webinar is dedicated to this topic.
And I want to point out that Nick just put in the chat the paper that Romina is referencing, just so you can take a look at it and see that work. Kostas, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'm Kostas Dialynas, and I'm a physicist at the Academy of Athens. I work in the field of space physics and more specifically in heliophysics. And I have been, privileged enough or fortunate enough to be able to work as a member of the legendary missions, the Voyager missions, that I adored since I pretty much remember myself. And so I also work, as Romina said, with energetic particles, so in situ ions, and in the heliosphere. And also in the past, I have been working and still do with energetic neutral atom measurements from a different mission that was also very close to my heart, the Cassini mission. And I would say that the way I intersect with the topic that we have today with the panelists, and I took a note of a few keywords here for myself to remind myself. One is stress, The other is burnout. And the third, I guess, would be imposter syndrome. And I would like to come back to those if there's more interest, and I can explain a few things. And I just want to point out here that Romina essentially enabled me, contacted me about this paper, and she said, you know, I'm doing this paper and I want you to contribute. And as soon as she did, and I have to thank her a lot for that, it was no-brainer for me. It was like that. Yes, let's do it. And I'm really glad, and I have to say that the SHIELD is, which of course I'm a part of, proud to be part of it. SHIELD is embracing all these discussions that we need to do within our community. So I'm going to put a period here, and I'm going to come back later with all these issues that I told you about, and let Eddie introduce himself.
Perfect. Eddie, how have you introduced yourself?
Thank you. First, I want to thank Marav, Sunlen, and Nick, and this distinguished panel for even inviting me. It doesn't matter how long I've been with the agency. I'm always flattered when someone asks for my opinion or my thoughts on something. My name is Edward Gonzales. My pronouns are he, him. And I've actually had the opportunity to have two careers. I started off working at an international law firm right out of high school. And the key thing about that is my bookend on that side is Rodney King, for those of you that are aware of the Rodney King incident that happened in LA.
Yeah.
Because of that incident, there was a commission that was put together called the Christopher Commission. And I was the coordinator for that commission. So I was able to see firsthand about not only the struggles and some of the illegal things that were happening within the LAPD. I was on the receiving end of a lot of those things, the victim of police brutality, which again created mental illness issues for my own self. Worked at this international law firm for about 14 years, and I finally had the experience and started at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in 2001. And I left there in 2018. And in between, I did a detail at headquarters for 2 years. I also did a fellowship at fellowship for 2 years at headquarters on another occasion. And then in 2018, I became the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility lead for heliophysics in 2018. And I'm now the program manager for culture, people, and equity. And what does that all mean? Well, this position was created after the George Floyd incident, may he rest in peace, which is the other bookend. And all that comes because of that. We're going to get into this in great detail, but I want to share this with you. It's important to be culturally aware. And for example, we're in the middle of Ramadan right now. We want to make sure that we are respectful to the people that acknowledge that and they celebrate that, and know these differences. So it's a learning experience for all of us. And I applaud SHIELD for bringing this up so we can actually talk about it. So it'll be a learning experience for all of us that are on this line. Last thing I'll say before I turn it back over to the moderator is you asked, what are some of the things you like to do outside professional? Is I like to mentor. I mentor about a dozen students and professionals on my own time because I want to make sure that our next generation of leaders are not going to get hurt, if you will, and try to provide them the recipe for success.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. And so I want to just frame our discussion today so we know where we're going to get, right? We have a limited amount of time. Today, we're going to talk about, again, making these things visible that may be invisible or that, as Romina said, we may have been nervous or afraid to talk about. We are going to have a follow-on webinar where we're going to talk more about strategy. So this is part one of just helping us say, we're making this visible. We really want to talk about it, but we're not going to get to the end. And so I just want to frame that as we get going. And so I want to start with a high level thing for each of the panelists. Again, from the work that you do and the paper that you've written, what you see as the biggest challenges in this heliophysics community that can really negatively impact our members' mental health. And Romina, if you want to start, you can, just to think about that.
Can you hear me? I'm having some audio issues.
We can.
We can hear. It's great.
Great. Okay. So specifically, I mean, there are overall, about 20% of people suffer from some sort of mental health issue. I think pandemic, I mean, you could argue against it, maybe Kostas does, but I think it intensified the stress and the burnout and the isolation that sometimes we face. But specifically for our research community, I think the stress, the pressure of securing grants and financial stress that is upon us. I think that's the main thing. I think we suffer from burnout. I think most of us do. And sometimes I think the danger is that we don't even realize it when we are going through it. So we work, over time, and we work on many different things, and that jeopardizes our mental well-being. The imposter syndrome, another thing that Kostas mentioned. But I wanted to say that Leonardo Regoli, who is one of our co-authors, actually brought up this point that especially for our early careers and our junior scientists and engineers in the field, the fear of missing out. I think that's a really big issue, because we don't want to say no. So we say yes to everything that comes to our way, and that puts additional stress on us. The pandemic made us work from home in isolation, and that was hard for many people, including myself. I needed to be able to talk to people, working on difficult problems. I needed that just chat time, which I couldn't get because we were in isolation. So that put a lot of additional undue stress on me. So I think these are some of the main challenges that I see. I do not have solution for for many of them, but for some of them, maybe there could be some things that we can do.
Great. Kostas, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to ask you the same question and have you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you brought up, including the imposter syndrome, just in case someone hasn't heard of that before.
Yep, sure. Let me start by something that Romina said about one of the big problems, I think, in our community that we need to address openly is the fact that many of us have stress. We suffer from it. And, it's a very weird beast because it manifests itself in very many different types and ways that all of them sort of create what I like to call, I don't like it, but it's like that, a vicious circle. Because it's sort of, you get a sort of a false sense of urgency or responsibility, which hides some kind of guilt behind it. And that feeds stress. And then as you get more stressed, that feeds back to your guilt. So it's what a physicist would say, I guess, a self-consistent system that leads to a criticality, because sometimes you've had enough and you break down. And this is an important part. And sometimes it gets a different, way, or it manifests himself in a very weird manner, like fear of fear itself. You become frightened that you're going to be frightened. And that, again, makes a vicious circle. And this is something that happens, especially in our community, because we work a lot. And because we think that everything is our responsibility. And we think that we have to know everything and that we have to be present about everything. And that leads us to what we call burnout, I guess, which is, I guess, one thing that I come to realize over the years is that burnout is not a personal problem. It's a problem of the community or the organization that you are part of. It's not your problem. So it needs to be dealt collectively. Otherwise, it's not going to be dealt. It's not one of the things that you do. And that leads me to the last point that I made, which is essentially the imposter syndrome, which, sometimes I'm going to make it very easy for everybody. I find myself in a room with other colleagues, specialists in every field, and then I look around and I say, what am I doing in this room? These are all specialists in the field. These are people that know things about what I do. So what am I doing here? Am I good enough to be here? Am I adequate, at least, to be in the presence of all these people? And do they really want to hear me say something about what I'm supposed to talk about in a speech or whatever? Which is a big problem, because I've heard from many people that they have this sense or syndrome, if you like. And this is, I think, one of the things that we sort of can discuss a little bit more. It's quite common in our field. So this is what enabled me to talk, to work with Romina on this paper. And we can come back on that later. So you can move on to Eddie, I guess.
Perfect. Yeah, and Eddie, I mean, you have done a lot of work at NASA, but obviously manage a lot of people. So I'd love for you to kind of have that high-level view of challenges that you've seen, because you are really good at managing it as best you can and supporting people, very supportive. So I'd love to hear your views on that.
Thank you. So I want to touch base on a couple of things. So I'm going to start off with touching a button on imposter syndrome, and then I want to end with the fear of missing out, because you had brought that up, Sandlin. So I'm going to touch on both, and then everything in between. So on the imposter syndrome, Kostas, I get it for myself, because, and I won't get into why, I don't have the academics that most people do. I'm usually on the panel with Dr. So-and-so, president of, and then Eddie Gonzales, right? So it has taken me a long time to overcome that fear and telling myself that if I'm really nervous, that something great is about to happen, and to be confident in what I have in my head, right? And more importantly, what I have in my heart. And no one can take that from me. And all of the life experience that I've had growing up, working for this law firm, and also working at NASA for the many years that I have thoughts that I think people want to hear, or maybe they're coming behind me and I can save them from stepping in some of these landmines, right? So some of the challenges, and I think this is something that we can all relate to. A lot of people during the pandemic, they may have bought a pet, whether it's a bird or a dog or a cat, right? They decided to have children. They've brought in elder care, whether it's their parents, a grandfather, or what have you. So it changed the dynamic of their home. And again, maybe they moved away, so they don't have a 20-minute commute anymore. Maybe it's 2 hours. And now they have to come into the office. And if they don't, it goes back to that fear of missing out, or what is leadership going to say? And that creates a mental strain on everybody. But here's the problem. They come in, they commute for 2 hours, they're missing out on things that they really should be doing at home, in addition to working, of course. And then everybody has their door closed, right? Or they're in meetings, virtual meetings, the entire day. And they're like, wow, I could have done this from home, and also helped my companion with the new baby, or with the pet, or whatever, right? Fill in the blank. And then for the early career hires, it's not fair to them either, because how did we learn growing up? How did we learn and gain the institutional knowledge from wherever we were at? We would walk down to to an open office. Hey, Kostas or Romina, can you come to my office real quick? I want to show you what's on my dry erase board. And what do you think about it? And then you're going to give me your thoughts, right? You can't teach that virtually. It's impossible. So a lot of our early career hires are missing out on that opportunity. So what I try and encourage to the people that are on center, I get it. You want to keep your door closed because you want to be safe, or maybe you're in meetings, but if you're not, open your door, or walk the hallways and introduce yourself to some of our early careers and say, would love to hear what you're working on. It's going to make them feel better mentally, and they're not going to be as exhausted or drained at the end of the day, because they've got a 2-hour commute after that. And then finally, when we're in a virtual environment like this, right? And we're wrapping up our meeting and they haven't turned off the owl yet or the projector, and you can still hear what's going on and you're at home. And I just heard Kostas ask Romina, hey, let's go to lunch and continue this conversation. And I'm at home going, well, wait a minute, what about me? I want to be part of that conversation. So we need to be respectful to those things. We need to constantly be thinking about what are things that we can do to make everyone feel included, to feel safe, to feel heard, and to try and not make them feel that they are going through or missing out on something. I'll stop there.
Great. Rob, I'm going to have you ask your question and Shay will address your comment here.
Okay. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and before, thank you, all of you guys, for being vulnerable and talking about these things. It's so great. This is all the spirit of Shield webinar, to be vulnerable and really talk about things that usually are not talked. So I like this vulnerable setting. I wanted to touch about something else that I discussed it with Sanlin, and we thought would be a good question. And I'm going to go circuitly asking that. In my view, that when you're trying to be creative, and we're all trying to be creative as scientists, if not, why are we here, right? Why we do the work because we wake up in the morning and you want to be creative. And creativity is related with inspiration. And when you are vulnerable, more relaxed, you can be creative. And if you are in a pure fear or anxious or protecting yourself, because as soon as you look around the room, there are people that are going to beat your idea down, or you present your work. I remember the first time I presented work way back then as a student, I just couldn't believe it. Why people are asking questions so aggressively? Like, I cannot think. I can't think on my feet. I can't, like, was so an assault to my soul that I was like, who designed this system? And so I think my question is, and as years pass, you just learn different way to protect yourself and to manage to be creative. But it's on my mind, and I wanted just to open a discussion what you guys think. How to deal with people that are sensitive. And I imagine that there is so many that are sensitive. And how can you be creative and debate ideas when the status quo is not? Our environment is extremely aggressive. And you can say maybe you need more critical mass, you need more webinars like this when we are more vulnerable. But how do you make a change, and how do you as scientists, I know I have a box of tricks that I use to manage to go through conferences and protect my soul. But I think this is a mental issue, problem, that is, for me, it's one of the forefront of a challenge.
I think I can start, I can tackle that somehow, if I'm allowed to start.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So I think this is an excellent point. In my mind, it's impossible for somebody to be really creative if they're not vulnerable, if they are allowing themselves at least to realize one important thing is that the thing they are searching for, they know nothing about it. Mm-hmm. This is a kind of vulnerability there. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was a saying that I loved from a poet, a French poet, Renier, satiric poet actually, and he was saying that 1,000 times I took the flashlight. I'm translating right now, so it's not going to be accurate. 1,000 times I took the flashlight to go out and search in the middle of the day, so it's bright, and I'm taking my flashlight and going out. That shows two things. One, vulnerability, because I'm admitting that there may be things that I'm not seeing, even though the sun is up there and it's
beautiful,
bright light.
I love it.
And the second, and the second is that you shouldn't assume that you know things. You go out like a white canvas, and you have to allow yourself to be out there and try to understand all the things that you think maybe you did in the past, but actually not. So this is one. And it goes hand to hand with another thing that I wanted to say, and it's amazing, and it goes to the solution that you sort of asked, Murav, which is not a solution, is that's something different. It goes hand to hand with the fact that we're going to be amazed about how many things we learn just by asking simple questions, very simple ones. I mean, asking people, really, all those aggressive people, maybe they're protecting something to be aggressive. So maybe we need to approach, or you need to approach people and sort of ask them questions, simple, to get to know them better as people, not as scientists. Because sometimes this is just a role, this is just an act. That's what I'm trying to say. And I'm going to stop here and continue later, but
I loved it. I love the poem.
it's not mine, so it's great.
Either Romina or Eddie, if you want to also address Murav's.
Sure. One of the things that I think is important that is working at Goddard in heliophysics in particular is I meet with leadership weekly. And I remind them that when they're hosting, whether it's virtual, hybrid, or in person, to remind people of the code of conduct and to make sure that we realize and recognize, and I say it when I start my meetings, I chair many committees, and I'll say at the very beginning, this is a very diverse group of people with various ideas that are going to have solutions to these problems that are different than you may have heard before. And we need to respect those ideas. And it's important to not cut anybody off. Let's let everybody and entertain all of these different suggestions, and then we can collectively come up with a common solution. And that's important. And now if we're talking about the AGUs or the tests or the GEMS or the LPSC, all of these different science conferences that are out there, I think having a code of conduct and having a strong moderator remind the group, and as the meeting is progressing, to continue with that reminder to say, Eddie, that made a really good point. Let's be respectful. We're going to hear from Romina next, right? Obviously, we don't need to do that here, but I understand, and I've heard people that are either threatened by what's happening and they feel that they're a subject matter expert and they're maybe late in their career. So they're hearing from somebody that's early career or mid that has these different ideas that he or she never considered. So they feel threatened by it. So therefore they'll try to poke holes in it, right? But a good moderator can put a stop to that in a very nice way, of course.
Yeah, before you go, Romina, I just want to read something that Julie put into the chat, where I'd love to see systematic change, non-verbal questions at conferences, Slack or text, but also this idea of cultural change where we stop calling on questioners if they're known to be argumentative and having allies in positions of power, like you're saying, to, you know, calling in their colleagues if they're being aggressive. But I think, like you said, having very strong moderators to also help elevate voices. Romina, love to hear what you have.
Yeah, I love all these answers. I think every one of us are coming from different angle, and that is the beauty of having a diverse group. So I was thinking that sometimes, you know, Merav, to your points, that sometimes, you know, we face aggressive people. I think in our science community there are a lot of egos. There are a lot of strong personalities that, you know, sometimes that comes between of doing more innovation or doing more of the same. I think we cannot, well, in my opinion, we cannot change other people, but we can change our own approach to deal with this issue. I think understanding that, a better understanding of how we feel about this problem and how others feel about this specific problem, I think that will help us to tackle this issue in a more productive way. I have been reading a lot on emotional intelligence and what is it that how we can deal with other people better. And I think even in doing research, that could be very much applicable. If we know exactly, if we can have a better understanding of others' emotions, if we can have some empathy with them, and have some better social skills ourselves, we can able to calm down the situation, all the differences that we see sometimes in the arguments that rise up in meetings and stuff like that. So that could help us a lot. So I think we need to work on ourselves better in order to manage the situation. And as Kostas pointed out, I think being vulnerable is very important. If you think that you know everything, there is no way, no room for innovation. So we always have to have this mindset that there are things that we don't know, and be open to other ideas, and having fresh eyes coming to the, and new generation coming to the science, to our community. I think that's a great way forward.
Great. I want to read something that Shay put in the chat as well, as thinking of things that I and others talk have mentally negatively impacted mental health. This publish or perish, right, paradigm, fear of being swiped, quantitative metrics success, like the H index, which might impact hiring, reliance on soft money, as we talked about, low proposal acceptance rates. So lots and lots of things. But one thing, and Eddie, you might be the best right now to answer this. I just want us, right, I see lots of managers online, really just take a step back and say, what are the consequences when we have a community of not understanding, addressing, and supporting mental health concerns? So just to like really bring it home, like it's really impacting individuals, but to talk a little bit just about how does it impact the community as a whole?
When you say community, are you talking about the heliophysics community? Are you talking about community at large? Well, what do you mean by community?
I think let's start with like how it might impact the heliophysics community in negative ways if we aren't addressing this. Just what we kind of know about that.
Yeah, I think it's important to never assume. So I'll give you a really good example of something that happened recently, and everybody here is aware of it. In February of this year, there was a rather large layoff at the NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Everybody is aware of that. That happened on February 6th, I believe. And I believe it was 700 or 800 people that were let go. And the manner that they were released was, it was tough. It was like, go home, don't come to work tomorrow, check your emails in the morning. What a long night that must have been for a lot of people. Well, if it could happen there, it could happen anywhere. So again, people's awareness was heightened, at Goddard, and people were feeling a certain way. So I immediately got together with leadership and I said, okay, where are we at? How are we doing? Have you heard anything? No, we're fine. At least we're fine through the next fiscal year. Okay, then it would be a good time to send out something and remind people that we're doing okay. If you have any questions or concerns, you can talk to us. If it needs to be elevated to a level that you need some additional support or counseling because you're struggling with it, here are your resources. Because as you know, and I mentioned this yesterday when we were chatting, if I was to call and make an appointment with a counselor right now, they would tell me anywhere from 3 weeks to 6 weeks from now I could get in. That's not going to work. However, some of the resources that we have at Goddard, whether you're a civil servant or a contractor, you can talk with somebody that day and you could have several sessions and hopefully will help you get out of that funk until you are better or until you can get to your own counselor if that is necessary. Again, providing people with the wellness checks is so important and giving people grace. And I want to share one other story that is a little off topic, but yet it matters to what we're talking about today. I'm driving home and this woman cut me off. And I thought, okay, fine. And then a couple of lights later, she cut me off again. And then I noticed she cut off several people and people are honking and, doing and saying other things. Finally, about a half mile down the road, I see that she pulled over and she goes running out of the car. She was going into a daycare center and it was 5:15. So for every minute, she was probably getting charged $25 or whatever. She wasn't trying to harm anybody. She wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I have no idea what she went through to get to where she was at that particular moment. So again, it's giving people grace. It's so important, especially when something like layoffs exists or anything else. As leaders, as managers, as directors, we need to make sure that we check in with people. And that's so important, because I know when someone checks in with me, it makes me feel better, and I know that people care.
Maraf.
I just wanted to add quickly for the, I think the comment that you guys gave on having very strong moderators. I think it's a really good idea. And because I think for so long, and it's not just in our community, I hear it, my sister's a professor, she also has a whole community. It's the amount of aggressiveness of type A bear hunters are the one, and I hear it from other communities. I think it's prevalent, and there are changes. There are new community coming, but some changes I feel are glacier, and I think it's detrimental for the new generation to feel welcome too. But I do think that this is an important burden on us to train the leaders that we have already, or the younger that are coming, to be able to speak up and say, this sounds like hazing, or it's not acceptable. I really call it out, like spell it out. We don't like the tone of this question, we will move on to another speaker. You just have to do it once from the podium, and that is going to set the tone. But I think there is a necessity for this intermediate generation that is coming up to be chairs of sessions, and to have this, and it takes some strength to do it, to not feel that you're calling up a type A in the community that your career depends on, and you're going to say to that person that you're hazing. It is not an easy task to ask. So I think we might need to iterate and finesse that. They are still vulnerable, and usually the hazing people are the type A that are leaders in the field, where they don't even see that anymore. They were raised like that. They don't see what the problem is.
And see, to that point, and you're saying this so eloquently, thank you, is that they went through it themselves when they were coming up.
Exactly.
So they'll turn around and do the same thing to the next generation. Having a strong moderator and creating a safe space at all times is going to.
But how do you do that? I think it's a tricky question. We can continue talking about it. I think it's a tricky question.
Yes.
And you know what? There's an interesting thing is that these people don't understand that, for example, disagreement. You disagree with somebody and then you start yelling and becoming aggressive or whatever. Disagreement is actually the fundamental process for moving forward. So we should embrace disagreement.
Yes.
Yeah, Kostas, but we live in a world that egos are involved, as Romina was saying.
I know. That's why.
Yeah.
And you know, this is one of the amazing qualities that I actually like about, for example, SHIELD, is that we are trying. And this is a good example of how to deal with it. We are trying to get all these people, including myself, that disagree with others, and try to, work out our disagreements to move forward, because this is what drives research. For example, if we're talking about the heliophysics community or any research community. And this is something we have to, leadership needs to sort of project that somehow.
Right.
I do want to point out, as we're talking about kind of all the issues that we've talked about, and we look at what is known from the literature, just to point out the most obvious thing, that the individuals who are going to give up, right, leave the field earliest are the ones the most vulnerable, right? So they might be the people who have children, or who are caring for elders, or didn't have great mentors or community growing up and don't feel strong belongingness, perhaps, right? People of color, people who come from communities that did not have that support. So I just want us to also remember that as we're trying to have more inclusion, and we're trying to bring in new voices and new wonderfulness that we really need to think about how to support everyone, but especially have supports. We have a wonderful question in the chat that I'm going to read. As a young career scientist who crave receiving mentorship, right, I might ask the panelists about what are the main challenges for healthy mentorship within our community, considering the issues already discussed.
Could the question be more difficult?
So Romina, I'll have you start. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this is a great question. Thank you for asking it.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to the heart of this problem goes back to what she brought up, and that is to the measure of success. We are measuring success as the number of grants that we're going to get, the number of our H index, number of publications. We live in a very competitive field. So everyone is basically thinking about themselves, start thinking about, covering themselves. We are in a tough business. It's hard to do, but when you bring in new generations, when you bring in students and postdocs, I think the supervisors or advisors, they need to feel responsible for their future. To the point, Stanley, that some people leave, I don't think it's necessarily bad for people to leave the field. I think our responsibility as the community members is to give them enough skills in order to give them freedom and give them option to be able to try different things. I mean, not everyone who is a student in heliophysics needs to stay in heliophysics. They can try other things if we give them enough skills, if we equip them with enough skills that they can have the options to stay in the field or to move on, to work on the data science in healthcare, for example. I don't see anything is wrong with that. But the thing that could be wrong is that if we just bring in people and do not support them, and we think about our own career, just about our own career, instead of supporting them. So I think if we can redefine our measures of success, if, for example, someone who works on instrument development, on instrument calibration or model development, these are extensive work, but they may not necessarily result in as many publications or anything. So their H index might suffer, but it doesn't mean that they are not being productive enough. They are not contributing to the research in the community. So if we can take care of that, then maybe that opens up more ways for the leaders, for the supervisors, for the advisors to be able to support the next generation.
And Senlin, if I may, I have a different approach in regards to mentorship because I mentor and I have so many mentors myself. I have many mentors for different things. And I always encourage our early career or even our new interns. It's great to have a mentor on your team of whatever mission or project you're working on, or even in the field of heliophysics, since this is what we're talking about. But it's also equally important to have a mentor outside of that arena, because if you have a team issue or problem, you can't talk about it with that mentor. They may have skin in the game, right? So you want to make sure that you've got somebody that doesn't have a horse in that race that you can talk to that can give you an unbiased opinion. And then also too, you want to have someone that is going to help you with your career, and not just from a technical standpoint, but from a practical standpoint. Whether it is, and then I also have mentors that are younger than me, because they teach me what the new generation is thinking and how they solve problems. So my advice to that young scientist is to get yourself a cohort of mentors that you can extract as needed to help you along with your career.
Wonderful, thank you. Marav, I'm going to have you address Julie's statement in the chat.
Yeah. So Julie, Julie Rathburn, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, was saying, I think she was bothered by the statement that Kostas made on that disagreement is how the field advances. So let me just elaborate a little bit more.
I can do that.
And okay, let me just say one word and I pass it to you,
Okay.
Kostas. I think what Kostas was saying, I will let him elaborate on my view, the issue that a lot of people just stand on their ideas and defend them to death, right? And you go to conferences and you have them duck it off. But it's very rare that you have an environment when people put the guard down, put their arms on the side, and come to a room and truly discuss why they're disagreeing on a question, and then you can see the edges where the assumptions have happened, where your bias happen, your preconceived notions happen, and then you can truly make advances, but you need to be able to put your ego aside to really do that. I think Kostas, go ahead.
Exactly.
I just
this is
wanted to
exactly
comment
right.
that.
Yeah, this is exactly right. So I didn't think that anybody would be bothered by that. But the idea is that in science, if you always agree with everybody,
Right.
then there's no point to, I mean,
right.
What are we doing? So we have people that have different views about or different interpretations about scientific ideas. And then the idea is to get them in a room and discuss these disagreements. And this is what takes the whole field or science move forward. This is this is what I meant. I didn't mean that we need to disagree with each other and eat our flesh in order to move forward. This is a different thing. It's discuss the things that we disagree upon. This is the whole idea. And that's what drives science is actually.
Right. And you have to be able in public do that, showing you are vulnerable. But I think the system is built
feel safe.
That feel safe to do that. I think this is a challenge for all of us to work.
Otherwise, I mean, I may disagree with something, and if I don't feel safe, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, let's do that. And maybe that's wrong. It's usually wrong, actually.
I'll just put, for folks who can't see the chat, a comment, and we'll continue on, but I just want to have Julia say that it sounds like it might be, this is the system and it works, but it might, but it's very cultural, and the science culture might be very white, male, Western European, not convinced that's the best way. So that's more of a conversation piece. I just want to elevate that. And again, we're not going to solve it, but also want to give a voice to that as well. I do want to be mindful that we just have a couple minutes. And so what I want to end with is, again, we're going to continue this conversation in May. We're going to actually have some more strategies for this as well. But kind of what are some key recommendations that either we personally can be doing or community can be doing right now to start to work on this issue? And so, Romina, if you want to start and maybe each person just give a brief recommendation so it frames our next conversation.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. That's a great question. I'll be brief. I think we can start from ourselves to have a better understanding of ourselves and our capabilities and our thresholds for stress. That will help us. If we know that something is triggering our interest, our level of stress, it's better not to follow that up and let it go. Fear of missing out. Yes, it happens, but sometimes we have to be mindful of the fact that sometimes we let go of some opportunities, but that will open up new opportunities in the future. So it's not all that bad. The other thing is that I think as the leaders, as supervisors, and as advisors, I think they can make some changes by opening up the culture, providing some psychologically safe environments for their team, so that people can speak up if there is any issues, and they don't feel the fear of being judged or discriminated against. I think that could help a lot to improve the overall well-being of the teams.
Great. Perfect. Kostas, final words.
Yeah, so as a final point, I guess in order to be able to overcome all these things, I usually say if you're having issues personal, I mean on a personal level, it's always a good thing to see a specialist. Perhaps this will help. I mean, on a personal level. On a more collective level, I would agree with Romina that it needs to be more focused on an organizational level for the issues that we touched today, at least. These are not personal stuff. You cannot resolve them by yourself. You need the organization working with you, not against you. That's what I would say. And I think we have 1 minute left. So, Eddie.
Yeah, Eddie's going to bring it home.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm hoping and I'm hopeful, as Romina pointed out too, that we need to be the change that we want to see. That's key. And I feel that as the next generation comes in and the next generation and the next generation, that it is going to get better, and I'm hopeful. When I see that, seeing a panel like this from Shield, this would have never happened 10 years ago, I don't think. Even discussing the subject of diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, you didn't discuss those things. You didn't discuss mental health. So I'll use this example, and I'm hoping that there will be a wave of change, but it's going to take some time, is when you look at, and I'm going to use my ethnicity because I'm Native American and I'm Mexican. When you're looking at the Mexican community, you had your first generation college students, and they struggled because their parents were unable to help them with their homework, right? Because maybe they had a third grade education like my mom did, or didn't even graduate from high school like my father, right? So now as my kids go to school and they go to college, maybe I can help them a little bit, and then they will be able to help their kids, and so on and so forth, right? And we were seeing that happening now. We're looking at second and third generations now of college students. So I'm hoping to hear about second and third generation ways of solving things to be kinder and to get rid of the type A's, and to have, as mentioned, a strong moderator that can gently say, I'm going to stop you right there. Let's remember our code of conduct, and let's be open and give each other grace as we come up with problems for common solutions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It is the top of the hour. I want to point out we do have a very short survey that will help us as we are doing panels. It's in the link. We'll also be sending it out. I want to thank all of our speakers for, again, being in this brave space to share something that often we don't talk about. And so it's been wonderful. This will be posted, and we will be following up in May with, again, a discussion of how strategies for ourselves in the community. So thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.